Welcome to the webinar on how to write a killer speech. Now, this webinar is to help anyone that may have to prepare and present a speech, and I'm talking about the writing of the speech. It may be something as simple as a wedding speech, a farewell speech for someone who's retiring, or it could be a conference speech, a seminar speech that you're delivering at a seminar or a convention. A lot of people ask me, how do I prepare a speech to have maximum impact? How can I present without notes? So this webinar will give you a very quick overview on how to write a speech. Peter Dew's my name. I'm a public speaking trainer and coach, and my passion is teaching you to find your voice so you can confidently and effectively make those speeches, have those conversations with the people that need to hear your message. How to participate, ask questions as we go. I will pause periodically and say, are there any questions? But please don't wait for me to say. And if you have a question, you can type it in the question box. Good morning, Sharon. We've just got underway, doing a bit of housekeeping. Take notes as you go. And those of you who've been on webinars before know that this webinar is being recorded. And what that means is that if I skip over something too quickly for you, or you want to review something, the recording is available for you to review in your own time. Ask questions as we go. The other thing is apply the information to real world examples for yourself. So the best way is to, as I'm speaking and sharing the information, good morning, Nicholas, we've just got underway, ask yourself, if you've got a speech coming up, what am I going to do differently to prepare for this coming speech? If you don't have a speech coming up, think back on your most recent speech, your most recent presentation. What could have I done differently to make it more impactful as a result of what you've learned today? So it's not just merely about listening to the information, it's about applying and thinking, how can I use this? All right. The agenda, where do you start? So you've been asked to present at a conference, you've been asked to write a speech that you're going to present at a workshop. Where do you start? What's your core message? How do you open your speech? How do you close your speech? The concept of that 3 to 4 points. Use of stories. I'm not going to go into storytelling. I have another webinar on how to tell stories, and wrapping all of these bullet points into a safe and simple structure. So that's the agenda for today. So where do you start? And this comes down to your clarity of your purpose, a purpose-driven presentation, a purpose-driven speech. If you don't know what your core message is, if you don't know what you want people to do, then anything you say will take them there. There's that scene in, or that section of Alice in Wonderland where she comes to a cross in the paths and she's not sure whether to go right or whether to go left. And there's a Cheshire cat sitting up in the tree. And so Alison, this is Alison in Wonderland, I may have said Dorothy, but it's Alison in Wonderland. Alison says to the Cheshire cat, which road should I go? Which way should I go? And the Cheshire cat says to Alice, well, where do you want to end up? And Alice says, I don't know. And then the Cheshire cat replies, then it matters not much which path you take. If you don't know where you want your audience to go, then it doesn't matter what you say. So how do you start? Start with the end in mind. This is the outcome, the result. You've now finished your presentation. What do you want everyone to do? What do you want to happen after you've spoken? What change do you want them to make in their work, in their careers, in their lives, in the community? How do you want to make them feel? Do you want to make them feel they've got hope? They can see light at the end of the tunnel. They now know that they too can achieve this. What new knowledge do you want them to have? And don't do information overload. One key message will really help them. And they won't remember your 5 pillars to success. They may not remember your 7 strategies to accomplish everything you want to, but if they've got the feeling and they know they can do it, they've got your notes, they've got your email, they've got your website, they've got your handout, they can retrace the 7 steps or the 4 pillars. But what's the core knowledge they must know to help them believe in, incorporate your core message into their way forward? And as you leave the presentation, what do you want at the forefront of their mind? Now hang on to this. This is as they leave. What do you want at front of mind? This will help you to work out where you're going to start crafting your presentation with the end in mind. Start preparing your presentation with a clear understanding of what you want to happen, the purpose. Let's look at your core message. And by asking yourself these 2 questions, you'll get that clarity of purpose, that core message. So the first question is, what do you want them to remember in 3 months' time? Let's say you bump into me in the Hay Street Mall in 3 months' time. So Nicholas, Sharon, Sarah, Stephen, you come running up to me and you say, Peter, I saw you present 3 months ago and I remember. What one thing do you want people to remember without a doubt? So that's the first question you ask. If they only remember one thing from my 20-minute, my 30-minute, my 45-minute keynote, my presentation, one thing, what is that one thing? And the second question to ask yourself, of course, is why does it matter to them? This is the old what's in it for me. Me being the audience, not me being you, the speaker. Why does it matter to them? I'm listening to you. What's in it for me? And if there's nothing in it for them, then the reality is people may not buy your message. And one of the ways of working out what's in it for them is you need to get in your audience's footsteps. You need to find out what their pain point is, their problem, their concerns, their issues. And if not pain, what are the goals they want to achieve? So those 2 questions help you develop your core message, your clarity of purpose. What do I want them to remember? And why does it matter to them? Now you're ready to start preparing and scripting a traditional speech. So how to open? It's called the rule of primacy. Those first 30 to 60 seconds matter. The first words are important. This is behavioral psychology. People remember the first words you say. So please start strong. Script and prepare an important and attention-grabbing opening. This can be in the form of a quote, a statistic, a story, something short, sharp that grabs attention. One of the workshops I run is how to overcome your fear of public speaking. And this is how I start that workshop. Mark Twain says there's two kinds of speakers in this world. Those that are nervous and those that are liars. And this gives me great confidence, because what Mark Twain's saying is that if you don't have nerves when you're doing public speaking, you're probably lying. And this, so I'll stop there. That's my opening. I deconstruct it a little bit further. Mark Twain said there's two kinds of speakers, those that are nervous and those that are liars. It creates relevance for how to overcome your fear of public speaking. A statistic, if you're talking about elder abuse, family violence, an amazing statistic that grabs attention, then you go into your message, your solutions. Here's what not to do. Don't start with housekeeping. Given that the first 30 seconds are really important and apparently people remember them, don't use that 30 seconds to do housekeeping. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. Can I get you to turn your mobile phones off, please? The toilets are down the back. We're going to have morning tea at 10:30. Should a fire alarm go, then the exit point is the door on the side. Follow me. All right, let's get started. That is a waste of this valuable real estate, the first 30 seconds. So I will start strong with my first words, grab attention, create relevance, and then I'll say, now before I go on, can I get you to put your mobile phones on silent? We will have morning tea at 10:30 and any other housekeeping I need to do. But by this stage, I should have grabbed your attention. I should have created relevance for you. So, first 30 seconds matters. How to close. The last 30 seconds matters. So when I finish at 9:29, apparently the last 30 seconds I say matters. It's going to be freshest in your memory. It's the last words I say, then I shut up. I say goodbye. But do you want me to remember goodbye? I've really enjoyed my time with you, which once again, we don't end with that thank you. Thank you, you've been a really nice audience. I've really enjoyed my time with you. Do have a safe journey home. These are nice, polite ways of thanking people, but it's not powerful in your ending. So what's the memorable ending you're going to say? The call to action, the statistic, the quote, the closing statement, the summary of the three key things we need to do. Because it's the most recent words you say. Once again, behavioural psychologists say people remember. It is called the rule of recency. So end strong. Are there any questions on that? So what we've got is you've got clarity of purpose. You're clear on what you want people to do. You've done that by asking two questions. What will they remember in 3 months' time, and why does it matter for them? You've got a strong opening and you've got a strong conclusion, a strong closing. And in speaking terms, we say nail your beginning, nail your opening, and nail your ending, nail your conclusion. So thanks, Stephen. What about acknowledging traditional landowners? This is a really good point. So if we just go back one slide, rule of primacy. It is around Australia, and wherever I go, I like to acknowledge the traditional landowners. I've had big discussions with Noongar people in Perth, just Noongar participants, health workers, and I've said, how do you feel about me starting strong and then stepping back and say, look, before I go on, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional landowners, the Wadjuk people of Perth from the Noongar Nation, and I respect past and present custodians. And they, now that they understand the importance of the first words, just from a behavioural psychology perspective, people remember them. They're willing to say it's okay as long as fairly early on I do acknowledge the traditional landowners. So I travel around Australia, and when I'm in Mildura, I acknowledge the Latchi people. When I'm in Bendigo, I acknowledge the Dja Dja Wurrung people. I haven't had the deep discussions, but there's often Aboriginal people in the room, and they come up and thank me for having that cultural awareness and acknowledging the traditional landowners. I haven't had anyone say you should put that first. So great question, Stephen. I still think that starting strong, creating relevance, letting people in the room know what they're there for is very, very valuable. So you've got your core message. The next part is I like to use the rule of three. So the rule of three is another tool. People remember three things. And if you think of our literature, Three Little Pigs, Three Blind Mice, Goldilocks and Three Bears, Three Wise Men in the Bible. I may have said Three Blind Mice, Three Stooges, Three Bags Full of Wool, Baba, Black Sheep. In a court of law, you've got to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And of course, William Shakespeare said friends, Romans, and countrymen. So three remember is what people remember. So my recommendation is now you've got your core message and you know why it's relevant to them. Which 3 points, which 3 bits of evidence amplify, illustrate, bring us to your message, your way of thinking? If you've got a 4th point, that's okay. I don't really mind. But 3 is what people remember. If you've got 5 or 6, can I suggest you start to do sub-points? So if you've got 6 points, you could do point 1A, point 1B, point 2A, point 2B, point 3A, and point 3B. But it's the bigger points that people remember. So it's called the rule of 3. And it simply is because people remember 3 things. In fact, it comes from some research that the human mind can only absorb 5 chunks of information at a time, plus or minus 2 bits of atom. So 3 is the lowest common denominator. So 3 is a rhythmical, 3 blind mice, 3 wise men, 3 little pigs, 3 bags full, 3 bears. They just work. It's memorable. So what 3 points as you are for me? Not you as the speaker, but me as an audience member. What's in it for me, the audience member? And how do you do that? How do you find that out? You walk 30 moons in your audience's footsteps. You walk in your audience's footsteps. You understand, you do your research, you find out what they want. So when you're getting your 3 bits of evidence to support your point, depending on who your audience is, will determine which points you use. So when I work with the mining sector, I often have the 3rd point will differ to when I'm trying to give the same message to, say, the health sector. And these are two sectors I do a lot of work in terms of empowering the staff to be more confident, more effective in the spoken word. So the points that I'll use to illustrate something in the mining sector, probably there's two and often three that are common to both, but occasionally there's one point that is better for mining and another point that's better for health. So that's how you choose which 3 points. Same with stories. Which stories are you going to use to support your points? So what if you've got a 9-step process or a 7-step process? So how I would do that, so thanks Sarah for that, how I do that is, and I'll just go back one slide, is if I have a 9-step process or 7 pillars of success, I guess I would probably use point 1 as why this is important. And step 2 might be what to do. And step 2 might be the 9 steps, the 9 pillars. And so point 2 would have 9 subpoints. And that would be the model. And the third point would be how to implement it. Why it's important, what to do, the 9 steps, and how. So I've still got 3 key points in my presentation. And people won't remember the 9 steps, or they may if you use an acronym or you use a very memorable model. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Not that I remember all 7, I remember most of them, but I have some models that have got 5, 6 steps, and I use an acronym, and that helps me remember them. Or you can use your PowerPoint slides to illustrate that 9-step model. But I'd still keep it down into 3 key points. Why it's important, what you need to do, and how's the best way to implement it. All right, I need to move on. So share your stories. Stories are really important. Stories are what you weave around your points. Stories are what illustrate. Stories are the evidence of your point. Case studies, examples, anecdotes, experiences, quotes, metaphors. Walk 30 moons in your enemy's moccasins. How do you know what's in it for me as an audience? You need to get into my shoes. You need to experience what's happening to me. That's a mind shift change. I've got a story that illustrates that. I work with speech pathology students. Most of you know I'm a person who stutters, and getting in your audience's footsteps. One of the things that they used to do in speech pathology university was one day a student had to walk around campus with a fellow student, so there's 2 of them, and one must deliberately stutter. Now, the ethics of deliberately stuttering or faking a stutter, we won't go into those. And the other person must observe them so they can see that they're stuttering. And what happens is that speech pathologist sees the reaction, the rejection, the laughing, the humiliation that a person who stutters experiences. They experience it themselves for a day. When they ask a question in class, they have to stutter. The next day they swap and they become the observer, and the other person must be the person who stutters. This is getting in your audience's footsteps. So those speech pathologists, when they now go and work with someone who stutters, like myself, they know what it feels like, the pain that someone who stutters goes through, and the value they can deliver if they can help that person be more fluent. That's a story, that's an example of someone getting into the audience's footsteps. Use the right language, mining sector, health sector, different language. Frame it for those audiences. As I said, pick industry appropriate examples. You can use anecdotes or data, quotes, and demonstrate the value. The story needs to demonstrate the value to the audience. So let me just put this all together in a safe and simple structure, an easy structure. So this is how you prepare your speech. This is the mind map for a speech. What's that 30 seconds that grabs attention? What's that 30 seconds that closes your speech? So what's your 30 seconds opening? What's your 30-second conclusion? What do you want them to remember? Why does it matter to them? Now you've developed your core message. 3 key points that bring us, that amplify, that illustrate, that demonstrate your core message. And then around each point, walk 30 moons in your moccasins. Know your audience before you walk into the room is a key point. Then I build up my stories, my examples, my metaphors. And I just spoke about speech pathology, that's one example. And then when I'm doing a presentation, I can choose which story, which metaphor, which example best suits that audience, and then build some other stories for this point. And have stories for your last point. I mentioned in my introduction, I do another webinar on storytelling, so I can't spend much time on stories. But this particular information here, I call your bank of stories. You build a bank of stories that illustrate your key point. One of my key points is, what's in it for me? Know who's in the room. What's their pain point? A metaphor. So I'll just add another line for the metaphor. What's the headache in the room that you, as the speaker, are the paracetamol for? What headache are you taking away? Walk 30 moons in your moccasins. An extreme example of that is the speech pathologist who fakes a stutter for 24 hours to experience what it's like. All of these anecdotes, stories, and there's more, help illustrate my point. So that's a simple structure for putting a presentation together. So in summary, where do you start? With the end in mind. What do you want people to happen? What's your core message? Ask them those 2 questions. What do I want them to remember in 3 months' time? Why does it matter to them? How to open? Rule of primacy. First 30 seconds matters. How to close? Rule of recency. Take-home message. 3 to 4 key points. Remember the rule of 3. 3 blind mice, 3 wise men, 3 little pigs. Use your stories. Your stories illustrate the point. And you put all that together in that safe and simple structure that I shared with you, that mind map. Are there any last questions as I just start to wrap up? We've got upcoming workshops. Please share these. So, Curdy, it looks like you've just come in at the end of the webinar at 9:28. You can get a recording of the webinar. Curdy, just send me a email and we'll make sure you get a copy of the recording. Workshops coming up in Bunbury, in Karratha, in Perth and in Melbourne. So please share those with any people who may be interested. They're in our website. Upcoming webinars, if you want to learn more from me, the cost of not being influential as a leader. And this is when we do public speaking, and I've just shown you a structure for a killer speech. You're doing the speech to influence people. What's the cost of not being influential? What's the cost of doing a speech and it being hot air, i.e. having no impact? To do an icebreaker or not. So we spoke about how to start, but should we start with an icebreaker? These are my next 2 webinars coming up on 9th of July. How do you reach me? peter@peterdew.com.au, www.peterdew.com.au. Connect with me on LinkedIn, but just let me know you've attended my webinar or a workshop. So the next time you go to write a speech, don't just leave it to chance. Work out what your core message is. Work out the relevance. And don't, from your audience perspective, start strong, end strong, and don't just be hot air. So my question to you with your next presentation, what are you going to do differently to make sure you deliver a killer speech? Thank you.